The crystal tray hit the marble floor before Grace Bennett could catch it, and every head in the private dining room turned as if the sound had been a gunshot instead of broken champagne flutes. Lemon oil, expensive perfume, and the metallic bite of shattered glass filled the air around her knees while warm water leaked from the blue thermos tucked inside her service bag beneath the side table. She had brought it for her mother, not for this room full of men who measured people by the price of their shoes. Victor Hale stood near the center table with one hand resting on a leather folder, his smile thin enough to cut skin. "Careless," he said. Grace looked at the broken tray, then at the server beside her whose hands were trembling too hard to hide. Everyone in that room knew Mia had dropped the wrong order ticket first, and everyone understood why Grace had stepped forward before Victor could ruin the girl's job. "It was my station," Grace said. Her voice stayed steady, though her wrist still ached from carrying plates through a 12-hour shift. Victor's eyes sharpened, pleased by the shape of an easy sacrifice, then signed the incident report. He slid a paper across the table, his gold ring tapping once against the polished wood. Grace saw the line already filled in with her name. She also saw, beneath the restaurant letterhead, a small internal approval code printed beside Victor's signature, VH17. The same mark she had glimpsed last week on a hospital billing notice folded inside her mother's purse. She did not know what it meant. The audience would. Not yet. Across the room, Damian Moretti watched from a booth half hidden by amber light and smoke-colored glass. He had come for a business dinner, not for a waitress with tired eyes and a spine straighter than the men accusing her. His bodyguards remained near the wall, silent as shadows, but Damian's gaze stayed on Grace. She smelled of rain, coffee, and the faint lavender soap used in hospital bathrooms. Victor pushed a pen toward her. "You broke service protocol." Grace wiped one small cut on her palm with a white napkin, then placed the napkin beside the unsigned report. "I will take responsibility for." The tray. The room seemed to tighten. Not for a lie. Mia's breath caught behind her. Victor's jaw flexed. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, but Damian still heard every word. "You need this job." Grace did. Her mother needed dialysis 3 mornings a week. Rent was due Friday. The pharmacy had stopped extending credit. Her shoes had cardboard under the insoles because the soles had split in February. But poverty had taught her arithmetic, not obedience. She reached into her service bag, lifted the blue thermos upright before it spilled again, and set it carefully on the sideboard. The motion was small, almost domestic, and somehow it made the room feel crueler. "I need honest work," she said. "There is a difference." Damian's fingers stilled around his glass. Men had begged him, cursed him, promised him loyalty with shaking mouths. Few had refused pressure while standing on cut glass. Victor's smile disappeared. "You are making this difficult." "No," Grace said. "You are." A waiter moved as if to intervene, then stopped when Victor looked at him. The chandeliers threw hard white light over Grace's black uniform, over the damp stains spreading near her bag, over the paper waiting for her signature like a trap dressed as procedure. Damian noticed the hospital bracelet tucked around the handle of the thermos, pale plastic with Margaret Bennett's name printed in fading ink. He noticed Grace touch it once with her thumb before she folded her hands again. Victor followed that glance and understood where to press next. "Your schedule can change," he said softly. "Morning shifts, gone. Insurance forms, delayed. References, complicated." Grace's face did not crumble, but something in her eyes tightened around the edges. She thought of her mother sitting under fluorescent lights, smiling through nausea because Grace always looked frightened when she stopped smiling. She thought of the blue thermos warming both her hands on the bus before dawn. Then she pushed the report back across the table. "Write the truth, Mr. Hale." For the first time, Victor looked less amused than exposed. Damian rose before he decided to. His chair slid back with a quiet scrape that cut through the room more cleanly than shouting ever could. Conversations died. Victor turned, and the color drained from his face when he recognized the man stepping out of the amber shadows. Damian crossed the marble slowly, his expression unreadable, his tailored black suit absorbing the light around him. Grace did not step back. That interested him most. He stopped beside the broken glass, looked at the unsigned paper, then at Victor. She said, "Write the truth." Victor swallowed. "Mr. Moretti, this is staff business." Damian picked up the pen, turned it once between his fingers, and set it down untouched. Not anymore. Grace looked from the pen to Damian's face, and for one dangerous second, she understood that her worst night had just drawn the attention of a man no one in the room dared to challenge. Then Damian's gaze dropped to the blue thermos, and his eyes changed as if he had seen a ghost he had been waiting years to meet. Damian Moretti had seen men break under silence, but Grace Bennett only lifted her chin higher. The dining room held its breath around them, all polished marble, amber glass, and expensive fear, while Victor Hale stood frozen beside the unsigned report. Grace felt the cut on her palm sting beneath the napkin, felt the damp fabric of her uniform cooling against her skin, felt the blue thermos waiting on the sideboard like the only honest thing in the room. Damian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Bring me the kitchen log." Victor blinked once. "That is unnecessary." Damian looked at him, and the word died before it finished living. A young manager hurried away, shoes squeaking against the marble, and Grace watched Victor's fingers curl against the leather folder he had been guarding all night. She knew powerful men. They came to restaurants like this and treated servers as furniture with pulse rates. Damian was different, which did not mean safer. It meant harder to read. The kitchen log arrived in a black binder that smelled faintly of steam, garlic, and printer ink. Damian opened it himself. His eyes moved across signatures, delivery times, table assignments, and one narrow column of adjustment codes written too neatly to belong in a chaotic dinner rush. There it was again, small enough to miss. VH17 beside a canceled catering charge linked to a hospital charity account. Grace noticed only that Victor stopped breathing for half a second. The audience understood more than she did, and that made the air sharper. "Interesting habit," Damian said. Victor's smile tried to return and failed. "Administrative shorthand." Grace reached for her service bag. "May I leave?" Damian turned to her then, fully, and the room seemed to contract around the line between them. "Do you want to?" The question should have been simple. It was not. Her mother's dialysis center closed at 10. The bus took 37 minutes if traffic stayed kind. The thermos was leaking. Her hand hurt. Her job was hanging by a thread. "Yes," she said. "Then leave." Victor's head snapped toward him. "She is still on shift." Grace met Victor's stare before Damian could answer. "My shift ended 15 minutes ago." A fork fell somewhere in the room. The small sound cracked the tension open for one strange second, absurd and bright, and Mia almost laughed before swallowing it down. Pattern interrupt passed like a match flare. Then Damian stepped aside, giving Grace space instead of taking it. That unsettled her more than a command would have. She picked up the blue thermos, wiped the side with her sleeve, and tucked it carefully into her bag. Damian saw the hospital bracelet again, the faded name, the cheap plastic softened by use. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes went very still. Grace moved toward the door, each step measured because she refused to look rescued. She felt every gaze on her back. At the threshold, Damian spoke without turning toward Victor. "Her wages remain untouched." Victor's voice thinned. "Of course." And the report disappears. A pause. "Yes." Grace stopped. She hated that relief came first, hot and humiliating behind her ribs. She hated more that Damian had heard it in her silence. Outside the private room, the hallway smelled of raincoats, bleach, and cooling espresso. Grace pressed her cut palm around the thermos handle until the pain steadied her. Behind her, Damian's men moved like shadows, but Damian himself followed alone. "Not close. Not far. You should have that cleaned," he said. "I know how to clean a cut." "I did not say you did not." She turned on him beneath a dim brass sconce. "I do not owe you." Damian looked at her hand, then at her face. Good. That single word landed wrong. Not offended. Not amused. Almost approving. Grace had no answer for it, and he gave her none. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, reflecting both of them in warped gold. For a moment, she saw the difference clearly. His black suit, her stained uniform, his empire, her bus fare, his silence, her exhaustion. Yet his reflection looked at the thermos in her hand like it carried a history she had not agreed to share. When she stepped into the elevator, Damian did not follow. He only placed one business card against the brass panel before the doors began to close. "For your mother," he said. Grace's heart kicked hard, because she had never told him she had one. The card burned in Grace's pocket all the way to Mercy General. She did not call the number, though the black lettering seemed to press through her coat whenever the bus hit a pothole. Rain streaked the windows into trembling ribbons of neon, and beside her, the blue thermos sat upright between her shoes, leaking one patient drop at a time. Her mother was asleep when Grace arrived, one thin hand curled over the blanket, the dialysis machine humming with its soft mechanical patience. The room smelled of antiseptic, warmed plastic, and the chicken broth Grace had carried across the city. Margaret Bennett opened her eyes as Grace poured the broth into a paper cup. Long night. Grace smiled because mothers heard lies better than priests did. Just glassware drama. Margaret's gaze drifted to the cut on Grace's palm. That restaurant takes too much. Grace tightened the bandage with her teeth. It pays enough. It did not. Both women knew it, but neither of them fed fear after midnight. Downstairs, beyond the vending machines and sleeping security guard, Damian Moretti stood near the billing office while a clerk unlocked a side drawer with shaking hands. He had changed. Nothing about himself, yet the hospital hallway changed around him. Fluorescent light made his dark suit look almost severe. "No public notation," he said. "The family never hears my name." The clerk nodded too quickly. A paper slid across the counter, listing an overdue pharmacy balance for a stranger in room 312, a retired bus driver whose daughter had been crying beside the elevators. Damian signed the payment authorization, placed a cashier's check beneath the form, and walked away before gratitude could find him. Grace saw only the last few seconds. His hand leaving the counter, the clerk wiping her eyes, the old man's daughter pressing both palms to her mouth as if a miracle had passed without introducing itself. Grace stopped beside a half-dead ficus tree, unseen in the reflection of a darkened window. The hospital lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere a monitor alarm chirped, then quieted. Damian turned and caught her reflection watching him. Neither moved. "You follow people often?" she asked when he reached the corridor. "Only when they carry my business card like evidence." "I did not call. I noticed." His gaze dropped to her service bag. "Your thermos leaks." Grace looked down and saw the blue fabric darkening near the zipper. For one ridiculous second, after all the fear and debt and broken glass, that was what nearly undid her. She laughed once. Too small, too sharp. It startled them both. Pattern interrupt, fragile as cracked porcelain. Damian removed a folded handkerchief from his coat and held it out. Grace did not take it. "No favors. Then call it fabric." Her mouth tightened, but she accepted it because broth was soaking through her only decent bag. Their fingers did not touch. Both noticed. At the billing desk behind him, a printer coughed out another page. Grace glimpsed a red stamp across the top before the clerk snatched it away. Suspended review. Charity Dialysis Fund. Authorized hold. Beneath it, a name line had been crossed out so aggressively the paper had torn. Beside the tear sat the same clean little mark she had seen twice now. VH 17. It meant nothing to her yet. It would mean everything later. Damian saw where her eyes had gone. So did the clerk. The woman folded the paper and slid it under a file with the care of someone hiding a match in a dry field. "You should go upstairs," Damian said. Grace looked back at him. "Do not manage me." His expression remained still, but something like respect moved behind it. "I was warning you." "About what?" Before he could answer, Victor Hale stepped from the administrative hallway carrying a visitor badge in one hand and Grace's unsigned incident report in the other. He looked wrong here, too polished for the waiting room chairs, too satisfied for a place where people counted coins for medication. His eyes found Grace first, then the thermos tucked against her side, then Damian. The smile he gave them was careful and poisonous. "Miss Bennett," Victor said, "we need to discuss your future." Damian's body went quiet in a way that made the corridor feel smaller. Grace lifted the leaking blue thermos into her arms and held Victor's stare. "My future is not yours to discuss." Victor opened the folder anyway, and the first page inside was not from the restaurant. It was her mother's treatment schedule. Victor Hale had brought her mother's name into the hallway like a knife wrapped in paper. Grace did not lower her eyes to the treatment schedule again, though every date on that page had already burned itself into her mind. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 in the morning, chair 4 near the window where Margaret liked to pretend the sunrise belonged to her. The hospital corridor seemed too bright now, too clean, the fluorescent lights flattening every face until even fear looked administrative. Victor held the folder with 2 fingers, careful not to wrinkle the threat. "Your employment file is incomplete," he said. Damian moved 1 step closer, not toward Victor, but toward Grace's side, leaving enough space that she could refuse his presence without moving away. Grace noticed that. Victor noticed it too. "My job has nothing to do with her treatment," Grace said. Her voice stayed level, but her grip tightened around the blue thermos until the handle creaked. A drop of broth ran down the metal side and landed on the tile between her shoes. Damian looked at that small spill, then at the folder, then at Victor's visitor badge turned backward against his jacket. He reached out, slow enough for Grace to stop him, and took the badge from Victor's lapel. Victor stiffened. "Careful." Damian turned the badge over. It had no printed department, only temporary access and a smudged signature from administration. He placed it on the windowsill beside a dying plant, instead of handing it back. "You first." The words were quiet. The corridor changed around them. A nurse at the medication cart paused. The billing clerk stopped typing. Even the elevator seemed to wait behind its closed brass doors. Grace did not look at Damian, but she saw his hand open at his side, empty now, unthreatening. That was the first crack. Not mercy, restraint. A man who could have crushed the room chose to remove only a plastic badge. Victor smiled without warmth. "This is a private hospital matter. Then discuss it with her lawyer." Grace turned sharply. "I do not have one." Damian slipped a black phone from his pocket, set it on the counter, and did not dial. "You can. I said no favors." "I heard you." He pushed the phone no closer. "Options are not favors." The sentence landed between them like a door left unlocked. Grace stared at the phone, then at her own reflection in its dark screen, pale and exhausted in a uniform still stained from the dining room. She did not pick it up. Instead, she lifted the folder from Victor's hand before he could stop her and removed her mother's schedule herself. Paper rasped against paper, dry and ugly. "You do not use my mother to manage me." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You misunderstand leverage." Grace folded the schedule once, twice, and tucked it into her coat. "No, I recognize it." For a moment, Damian's mouth almost moved. Not a smile. Something smaller, gone before anyone could name it. He picked up the leaking blue thermos from where Grace had set it on the counter and held it under the water fountain, rinsing the sticky broth from the seam. The act was ordinary, almost absurdly domestic, and that made the silence around it heavier. His expensive cuff darkened where water splashed. He did not seem to notice. Grace watched him dry the thermos with his own handkerchief, the same one she had refused until necessity made pride impractical. No one in the corridor spoke. Damian handed it back by the body, not the handle, leaving the choice to her. She took it. Their fingers brushed this time. The contact lasted less than a second, but both of them went still. Victor saw it and understood enough to hate it. "Sentiment is expensive, Mr. Moretti." Damian's eyes lifted. The softness vanished from his hands before it left his face. "So is theft." Victor's expression did not break, but the pulse in his temple jumped once. Grace caught it. So did the audience. Down the hall, Margaret's room door opened, and her mother stepped out in slippers, one hand braced against the wall, her hospital blanket slipping from narrow shoulders. "Gracie." The name cut through everything. Grace moved immediately, thermos against her chest, dignity forgotten only as far as love allowed. She reached her mother before Damian could, steadying her with both arms. Margaret looked from Victor to Damian, then to the folded paper peeking from Grace's coat. What did they do? Grace kissed her mother's cold fingers. "Nothing I signed." Damian looked away first, but not before Grace saw him remove a silver ring from his right hand and close it inside his fist until his knuckles blanched. Victor gathered his folder, his smile returning in pieces. "Then I suppose we continue this at the board review tomorrow." Grace held her mother upright. Damian stepped between them and Victor without touching either woman. "No," he said. Victor paused at the elevator. Damian's voice stayed calm enough to terrify the walls. "We continue it tonight." Victor Hale did not wait for the board review. He came while the hospital changed shifts, when the halls filled with tired nurses, rolling carts, and families too worried to notice a predator walking in polished shoes. Grace had just settled Margaret back in a bed when the lights flickered once, and the dialysis monitor gave a soft warning chirp that made her blood turn cold. Damian stood near the doorway, phone in hand, speaking to no one, reading something that had made his face go still. Then Victor entered with 2 security officers behind him and a tablet tucked beneath his arm. "Time is up." Grace rose so fast the chair legs scraped tile. "Get out." Victor smiled. "Not your room." Margaret reached for the blanket. Embarrassed by weakness she had not chosen, Grace stepped in front of her mother, the blue thermos clutched against her ribs like a shield. Victor lifted the tablet and turned the screen toward them. A scanned treatment file glowed under the fluorescent light. Margaret Bennett. Coverage pending. Charity status suspended. Administrative review, he said. Damian's voice cut low. Undo it. Victor did not look at him. That was his mistake and his gamble. I cannot. He tapped the screen twice. Policy is policy. Grace saw the date stamp, saw the same approval code buried in the corner, small and sterile, VH17, sitting beside a hold placed less than 6 minutes ago. The audience knew the trap had teeth. Grace only knew her mother's machine had gone quiet again. A nurse hurried in, stopped at the sight of Victor, and went pale. Why is her session paused? Billing hold, Victor said. Margaret whispered Grace's name. Not fear. Apology. That broke something open. Grace crossed the room and pressed the blue thermos into her mother's hands. Hold this. Gracie. Please, Mom. Damian watched the exchange, and the object changed in the room. It was no longer a leaking container, no longer a small domestic mercy carried on buses before dawn. In Margaret's thin hands, it became proof of every morning Grace had chosen care over collapse. Victor looked at it too, and his smile sharpened. Sweet, he said, but not payment. Grace turned on him. You enjoy this. I protect systems. You feed on them. The words landed hard. A security officer shifted, uncomfortable. Victor stepped closer and lowered his tablet until only Grace could see the second file open beneath her mother's. Restaurant incident report. Termination recommendation. Character concern. Sign tonight, he said. This disappears. Grace's hand moved to her apron pocket. Damian saw it. Victor did not. Her phone was already recording. Say that again. Victor's eyes narrowed. Careful. Say it clearly. Damian's shoulders changed by a fraction. He understood. The dramatic irony snapped tight between all of them. The audience knew Damian had money, power, and men outside the door, yet Grace was the one holding the weapon that mattered. Her voice, her evidence, her refusal. Victor leaned in, perfume and antiseptic mixing around him. Sign the report. Or. A pause. The monitor hummed. Margaret breathed shallowly. Victor finally said it. Or she loses coverage. Silence hit the room, so sharply even Damian did not move. Grace's thumb pressed once inside her pocket, saving the recording. Then she looked at her mother, at the thermos in those trembling hands, and made the first decision no one had made for her. No, Victor's face hardened. Then watch consequences. He reached past her toward the machine controls, and Damian caught his wrist before contact, precise and calm, without twisting, without spectacle. Enough. Victor laughed once, too loud. You cannot touch this place. Damian leaned close, his voice barely more than breath. I already have. The door opened behind him, and 3 board members stood there with the hospital compliance director, all staring at the tablet in Victor's hand. Grace's phone buzzed in her pocket. The recording had sent. Victor's confidence vanished for one beautiful second. Then Margaret's monitor went dark. Edit the silence after the monitor went dark felt louder than any alarm. Grace did not remember crossing the room. Only that 1 second her mother had been sitting upright with the blue thermos in her hands, and the next she was beside the bed gripping the rail hard enough to hurt. Hospital staff moved quickly, but fear moved faster. It settled into the room, into the fluorescent light, into the spaces between breaths. Margaret tried to smile anyway. She always did. The effort made Grace look away. Damian remained near the doorway while compliance officers escorted Victor into the hallway. The confrontation had ended. The damage had not. Through the glass panel, Victor could still be seen arguing with the board members, his gestures sharp and angry. For the first time, he looked cornered. Grace should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she watched a nurse reconnect equipment and wondered how many minutes separated stability from disaster. She is not crashing, the attending physician said quietly. The interruption was brief. Grace nodded. The words entered her ears and went nowhere useful. Margaret reached toward her. "Sit down, honey." Grace sat because her mother asked, not because her legs wanted to. The blue thermos rested on the blanket between them. Its paint had chipped near the base months ago. The small scratch caught the overhead light. Damian noticed it from across the room. He noticed everything about that thermos. He noticed who carried it, who touched it, who needed it. He noticed because he remembered another hospital room years ago, another family waiting for news that never improved. Grace did not know that. The audience did. The dramatic irony sat quietly beside them. Time stretched. Nurses came and went. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere down the corridor, a television played a game show to an audience that laughed on cue. The sound felt impossible. At midnight, Grace stepped into the vending area for coffee she did not want. The machine swallowed her dollar and delivered a bitter paper cup. Damian stood near the window overlooking the parking structure. Neither spoke immediately. The city glowed beyond the glass, distant and indifferent. "You should rest," he said. Grace stared into the coffee. "That is expensive advice." A corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Most good advice is. Silence returned. Heavy. Familiar now. Then Grace noticed the folder in his hand. Public financial filings. Property transfers. Liquidation documents. "What is that?" Damian glanced down. "Paperwork." "For what?" He hesitated. "Not long. Long enough. A fund." Grace took the folder before he could stop her. She scanned the top page. Asset sale authorization. One building. Then another. Then a private collection listed beneath them. The total at the bottom made her blink. "You sold these." Damian looked back toward her mother's room. Someone needed the money more. He said it like weather. Like gravity. Like something too obvious to deserve discussion. Grace read the numbers again. The emergency treatment fund mentioned in the report. The one facing collapse. The one keeping dozens of families alive, including hers. She closed the folder slowly. "You did not have to." "I know." There it was. The second crack in the armor. Small enough to miss. Impossible to forget. The elevator opened at the end of the corridor. A hospital accountant stepped out carrying a cardboard archive box. He froze when he saw Damian. Papers shifted. One folder slipped loose and hit the floor. The accountant grabbed it too quickly. Then he hurried away without meeting anyone's eyes. Damian watched him disappear around the corner. So did Grace. A single label on the fallen folder had remained visible for less than a second. Internal audit review. Then it was gone. Small. Forgettable. Except it was not. Breadcrumbs rarely announced themselves. They simply waited. Grace returned to her mother's room carrying the thermos and the coffee. Margaret had fallen asleep. Damian remained in the doorway while monitors hummed softly in the dark. The room smelled faintly of medicine and broth. Grace set the thermos beside the bed and pulled the blanket higher around her mother's shoulders. When she straightened, Damian was still there, watching the sleeping woman, watching the chipped blue thermos, watching something only he could see. His phone vibrated. One message, one name, one piece of information that drained the last color from his face. Grace saw it happen. "What is it?" she asked. Damian looked at the screen once more, then lifted his eyes to hers. Someone just disappeared. The missing accountant left bloodless fingerprints on every lie. Damian's message held only 3 words and a security still. Alan Pike gone. Grace stood in the doorway of her mother's room while the hospital around her breathed in machines and whispered shoes. Damian did not move until a second image arrived. A cardboard archive box. A service elevator. Victor Hale's hand on the accountant's shoulder. Grace saw the ring first. Gold, heavy, familiar from the restaurant table. Then she saw the folder tucked beneath the box. Its corner bent, stamped with the same internal audit label from the hallway. Damian turned the phone toward her. No speech. No explanation. Just proof opening its mouth. Grace reached for the blue thermos on the bedside table because her hands needed something real. The lid was loose. When she tightened it, her thumb found a ridge beneath the handle, a thin strip of hospital tape she had never noticed under years of worn plastic. Margaret's handwriting had faded there. Not Grace. Gina. Grace froze. Damian saw the name. His face changed before his body did. "Where did you get it?" he asked. Grace looked at her sleeping mother. "She gave it to me." Damian's hand went to the doorframe. Not for control. For balance. Margaret woke to the silence, eyes moving from Grace to Damian, then to the thermos. The old fear in her face answered before any words could. Mom. Grace's voice broke smaller than a whisper. Margaret reached for the thermos with trembling fingers and turned the handle toward Damian. Beneath the tape, barely visible, was a tiny sticker from St. Agnes Children's Ward. Damian stepped back as if the room had shifted under him. Grace did not understand until Margaret pulled a folded photograph from the pocket of her cardigan. Two girls in hospital gowns, one smiling weakly, one holding the blue thermos between them like treasure. Damian's sister, Gina Moretti. Grace as a child, thinner, younger, memory erased by years of survival and her mother's careful silence. No one spoke. The breadcrumbs rearranged themselves in brutal quiet. VH 17 on the hospital notice. The missing payment in the charity file. The accountant fleeing with the audit box. Victor had not merely threatened Grace's mother. He had been feeding from the same fund that once failed Gina Moretti. Damian took the photograph, but his fingers never touched Grace's. He stared at the blue thermos instead. It had never been only Grace's devotion. It had been a relic from the room where his family broke, carried for years by the girl his sister had trusted. Margaret whispered, "I tried to report him." Grace looked at her mother. "Who?" Margaret closed her eyes. "Victor." The word entered the room and ended the old world. Damian placed the photograph on the bed, then removed his phone and sent one message. Across the hallway, the compliance director's tablet chimed. Then another. Then another. Files began arriving from an anonymous account marked by Alan Pike's initials. Grace watched Damian's men appear at the corridor entrance without being called. Victor's voice rose somewhere near the elevators, sharp with panic. Grace picked up the thermos and placed it in Damian's hands. This time it was not a burden, not a favor, not evidence of poverty. It was a witness. Damian closed both hands around it. And when he looked up, Victor Hale was standing at the end of the hall with a security key card and Margaret's suspended treatment order. Edit Victor Hale ran. Not far, just far enough to reveal what mattered most. The suspended treatment order shook in his hand as he backed toward the service elevators, his confidence collapsing faster than his lies. Damian still held the blue thermos. Grace stood between her mother's room and the corridor, watching years of pressure finally lose its balance. Security moved first. Compliance officers followed. The hospital board members advanced behind them, carrying tablets now flooded with files from Alan Pike's hidden archive. Victor saw the screens and understood the mathematics of defeat. Every transfer, every diverted payment, every forged authorization linked to the same code. VH 17. "This is fabricated," he snapped. No one answered. The silence was worse. Grace looked toward her mother. Margaret sat upright now, exhausted but alert, one hand pressed against the blanket as though steadying herself for impact. Then everything seemed to resolve at once. The treatment hold was canceled. The dialysis authorization returned. Compliance officers confiscated Victor's credentials. Security took possession of his tablet. One board member quietly informed him that law enforcement had already been contacted. For 4 long breaths, the tension broke. Nurses resumed moving. Phones rang. Someone laughed at a distant station. Grace closed her eyes. Damian lowered the thermos slightly. The world appeared to settle. False resolution. Real enough to believe. Then Victor smiled. The expression arrived too late and too calmly. Grace felt it before she understood it. Victor stopped resisting and looked directly at Margaret. "Check room 412. The hallway froze again. A nurse near the station went pale. Damian's eyes sharpened instantly. Grace did not wait for explanation. She was already moving. Room 412 sat at the end of the oncology wing. The smell reached them first. Smoke. Not fire. Electrical burn. Sharp and metallic. Hospital staff rushed forward. Inside the room, a supply cabinet had been sabotaged. Not enough to create catastrophe. Enough to force an emergency evacuation of several treatment areas. Enough to delay procedures. Enough to hurt the people who could least afford delay. Victor had built one final trap before anyone knew he was cornered. Grace stopped in the doorway. Her fear returned all at once. Not for herself. For her mother. For every patient depending on schedules measured in hours instead of days. Damian appeared beside her. "Grace." She looked at him. If they shut down treatment? The question remained unfinished. It did not need an ending. The answer lived in every hospital room around them. Then came the hardest decision of the story. Compliance officers needed a witness statement immediately. The archive files needed authentication from Margaret. If she testified now, the investigation could secure emergency funding and protect the treatment program permanently. If she testified now, her own treatment would be delayed during the transfer process. Grace looked through the glass at her mother. Margaret already knew. Mothers usually did. The older woman nodded once. No pressure. No sacrifice demanded. Only choice. Grace swallowed hard. Then she chose the larger future over the safer hour. We testify. Damian watched her say it. Watched her choose principle while fear clawed at every corner of the room. Victor heard it too. For the first time, he looked defeated. Completely. Security placed him in restraints and guided him away. He tried to speak. No one listened. The board voted before sunrise. Emergency funding was restored. The charity program survived. The diverted. Money was recovered through seized accounts and frozen assets. Victor Hale lost everything that had protected him. His power ended not with violence, but with exposure. The conflict was over. The villain was finished. Grace leaned against the corridor wall, exhausted beyond language. Damian stood across from her holding the blue thermos between both hands. The circle felt nearly complete. Nearly. Then Alan Pike's final archive file finished uploading. A photograph appeared on every screen involved in the investigation. Damian saw it first. His expression changed. Grace followed his gaze. The image showed St. Agnes Children's Ward from years ago. 2 girls. One was Damian Moretti. The other was Grace. But there was someone else standing behind them. Smiling. Younger. Unrecognizable at first glance. Until Damian zoomed in. The man standing beside both girls was not Victor Hale. It was Damian's father. Damian's father stood inside the last secret, smiling from a photograph that should not have existed. The image glowed on the compliance director's tablet, while dawn pressed gray light against the hospital windows, and for once, Damian Moretti did not look dangerous. He looked young in a way Grace had never seen, stripped of command, stripped of certainty, holding the blue thermos in both hands like it might break if he breathed wrong. Grace stood beside him without touching him. Margaret sat in a wheelchair nearby, wrapped in 2 blankets. Her treatment completed under emergency authorization while the board signed documents in a conference room down the hall. No one spoke until Damian placed the thermos carefully on the counter and reached for the tablet. He zoomed in on the photograph. His father's face sharpened. So did the badge clipped to his coat. St. Agnes Donor Liaison. Grace leaned closer. He worked there? Damian shook his head once, slow. He owned the foundation. Margaret closed her eyes. The movement was answer enough. Damian turned to her, but his voice stayed quiet. Tell me. Margaret's fingers twisted in the blanket. Your sister knew the fund was being drained. Grace went still. Damian did not. He only lowered the tablet, as if making room for the truth to stand between them. Margaret looked at the thermos on the counter. Gina hid receipts inside that thing. The room seemed to narrow around the chipped blue metal. She gave it to Grace before surgery, Margaret whispered. She told her to keep it safe. Grace touched her own throat, where breath had become difficult. Images came back in fragments, not as memories, but as textures. Waxy hospital crayons, orange gelatin cups, a girl with tired eyes pushing a blue thermos into her lap and making her promise something important. Damian stepped away from the tablet and opened the thermos with careful hands. The inside was empty except for faint scratches along the metal wall. He tilted it toward the light. Under the rim, hidden beneath years of wear, a number had been etched by a child's hand. Not a code, a room number. For 17, Damian's mouth tightened. He did not cry. He picked up his phone instead and called one person. Reopened St. Agnes. Then he ended the call. Grace understood the decision before anyone explained it. He was not protecting his father's name. He was letting it be investigated. He was choosing Gina over legacy, truth over blood, and he was doing it in front of the woman whose life had been bent by that same lie. Margaret covered her mouth with one trembling hand. I was afraid. Grace knelt beside her chair. You kept me alive. I kept you in the dark. Grace took her mother's hands and warmed them between her own. Then we walk out of it. Across the room, Damian watched them, and something in his face softened without permission. The board president entered with a folder, followed by 2 federal investigators and the compliance director. Victor Hale's name appeared on every page. Damian's father's signature appeared on 3 older ones. No one tried to make it cleaner than it was. Damian signed the release for the archives. Grace gave her recorded statement. Margaret identified the old correspondence. The investigators collected the tablet, the restored files, and the original treatment order Victor had used as a weapon. By 9 in the morning, Victor's access had been permanently revoked, his accounts frozen, and his emergency appeal denied. By 10, the hospital announced public protection for every patient in the charity dialysis program. By 11, Margaret's next treatment was scheduled without a billing hold. Grace read the confirmation twice, then pressed the paper against her chest and laughed once, breathless and disbelieving. Damian looked away as if her relief was too intimate to witness directly. She saw that too. Later, in the quiet courtyard outside the renal wing, the city sounded different. Softer. Buses sighed at the curb. Pigeons moved along the stone ledge. Rainwater from the night before clung to the leaves, catching the pale sunlight in small, bright pieces. Grace sat beside Damian on a bench, not close enough to pretend nothing had happened, not far enough to deny what had. The thermos rested between them. "You got what you wanted," she said. Damian looked at the hospital entrance, where Margaret was speaking with a nurse about discharge instructions. Not all of it. Grace waited. He did not fill the silence quickly. That mattered. "I wanted to know I was not only what they made me." Grace picked up the blue thermos and turned it in her hands. The chipped paint caught on her thumb. And Damian looked at her then. "I am still deciding." "Good," she said. "Decent people usually are." His eyes lowered for a second, and when they lifted again, the coldness had lost its throne. Grace handed him the thermos. Not because she owed him. Not because he owned any part of her story. Because Gina had carried truth in it. Margaret had carried fear in it. Grace had carried love in it. And now Damian could carry something forward that was not guilt alone. He accepted it with both hands. Margaret waved from the entrance, steady on her feet with a nurse nearby, but not holding her up. Grace stood first. Damian rose beside her. No guards moved in front of them. No one gave orders. Grace slipped her hand into his, and Damian held the blue thermos in his other hand as they walked together through the newly opened hospital doors.